I'll be moderating today's webinar, which will be presented by members of the GOA-ON South Asia Regional Hub. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the 4 organizations that sponsor this webinar series. First, GOA-ON, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Second, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration in the United States. Third, the IAEA-OAICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And finally, the IOC UNESCO, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. For those of you who are new to GOA-ON, it is a collaborative international network of over 900 members from 105 countries designed to detect and understand the drivers of ocean acidification and the resulting impacts on marine ecosystems. During today's presentation, all participants are in listen-only mode. You are welcome to type any questions into the questions box, which can be found at the bottom of the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be monitoring incoming questions and we'll pose them to our speakers during the question and answer section, which will begin immediately after the presentation. At this time, I would like to give a warm welcome to today's speakers. We have PB, who is a professor of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Kolkata, IISER Kolkata, in India. He also leads the newly established Center for Excellence in Blue Economy at IISER Kolkata. PB did his PhD at the Plymouth Marine Laboratory and postdoctoral research at Princeton University. PB is the coordinator of the GOA-ON South Asia Regional Hub on Ocean Acidification, also known as SAROA. Dr. Anwisha Ghosh is presently a postdoctoral research associate in the Center for Climate and Environmental Studies at IISER Kolkata in India. Anwisha did her PhD on microbially mediated carbon cycling in estuarine mangroves from IISER Kolkata. Anwisha is an early career researcher representative of both the ASLO ECR Committee and SAROA Hub. Anwisha received the prestigious CAMIDE Lecture Award in 2022 from the Asia Oceania Geosciences Society for her outstanding research in the area of biogeosciences as an early career scientist. And finally, Dr. Amit Kumar is a faculty in the Center for Climate Change Studies at Satyabama Institute of Science and Technology in Chennai, India. Amit did his PhD and postdoctoral research at the Anton Dohrn Zoological Station in Naples, Italy, in the areas of seaweed ecology and ocean acidification. Amit is an ECR representative in the SAROA Hub. I would like to give a very warm welcome to all of our speakers, and without further ado, I will turn it over to them for the presentation.
Hi, are we good to start?
Yes, and we should take it away.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the webinar today. This is very special for us. We've been gearing up to introduce the SAROA Hub to all of you for a while now, and we'll be walking you through a very brief presentation where we essentially tell you the idea behind why this hub had to come up and what we are essentially planning to do as we are a part of the hub. So as you can see, today's talk is titled as Healthy and Sustainable Oceans in South Asia, the Importance of the SAROA Hub. And we as panelists, we also have Indranil with us, who is a ECR member in our group, and she belongs to Sri Lanka, but she's not here today. So we'll be hearing from her very soon. So could we move forward, please? Right. Yeah. So very briefly, this is the first map that we're going to show you. This is essentially the countries that are within South Asia. So if you belong to any of these countries, we'll be very happy to have you as a part of the hub. Do please reach out to us, and we are really looking forward to getting members from all of the countries here, and of course, including India, which takes up a pretty big space in this entire region. Gabby, next, please. And these are the countries which are part of Southeast Asia, also largely belongs to the SAARC countries. And you can see, and I'm hoping that we have members or people working in oceanography, people monitoring ocean acidification, of course, belonging to these countries. And we have you with us here. Please do reach out to us if we have not been able to connect with you yet, and we'll then take it forward post the webinar and see how we can expand our research and work and how we can work together. Gabby, next, please. Right. So essentially, why this entire need to come up with another hub or yet another group of scientists who are extremely willing to work together, because of course, Southeast Asia has this very rich biological hotspot that all of us are looking at. And you can see a very small map here, which essentially shows you the coral reefs that we have in this region. And I'll show you some of the other things that we have, of course. And you can see the high density of the coral reefs that we have in this region. And of course, I'm sure many of you are already doing extensive research on this. Gabby, next, please. So with the very fast changing population dynamics that we have in South and Southeast Asia, what we saw is that some of the other very important marginal habitats, for example, the mangroves that we have here, are fast depleting. And this could be because of any number of reasons that is there. And here I have put up a map, which is pretty recent, is by Warrington. You can go back to the publication. It has some amazing information. And you will see that, unfortunately, for most parts, we are losing a lot of the mangrove cover regions that is there in South and Southeast Asia. And I'm sure, as all of you might be knowing, this region is the highest density of mangrove forests. So you can imagine that if we are witnessing some rapid losses in the forest region cover in itself, in the forest area, and obviously there is associated degradation of the ecosystems, we are heading for some very troubling information in the coming centuries. Gabby, next, please. So this is just to give you an overview of what it really looks like, because I said that this is such a rich biodiversity hotspot, and you can see that some of these images will show you how fantastic the biodiversity in this region is. And I'm sure if you're working somewhere down in the site, you know better than me that it looks absolutely brilliant. So this is a mangrove forest aerial view from Myanmar. Debbie, can you move forward? And this is the Indian Sundarban. So this is where I work. The place is very close to my heart. And I did my PhD here, and it all looks very great. And there's a very lush green mangrove forest cover here, and it stretches between India and Bangladesh. And we have an approximate area of about 9,000 square kilometers, which is very fast depleting in some of the regions. Gabby, can you go forward, please? So we'll play a short video for you, and where you'll see why we are suddenly becoming so concerned for the habitats in South and Southeast Asia, and why we were desperate to set up a hub. And you can see the amount of erosion that is happening in this region. And even though there is a very strong forest cover, these are all older mangroves, not young ones. These are being completely washed away by the river changing its course. There are floods every now and then. And I'm sure all of you are already aware about the amount of cyclones, super cyclones, depressions that is happening off the Bay of Bengal, and that is constantly hitting some parts of India. And Sundarbans has been acting as a barricade for quite some time. But we fear that if we keep losing this forest at this rate, we are going to be obviously witnessing a lot of associated changes in this entire region. And I'm sure as I'm showing you these photos, you can relate even back at home, a lot of these changes that could be happening at your sites as well. Gabby, next, please. Again, back to the coral reefs. So this was a paper that was published back in 2017, which essentially showed the amount of changes associated with ocean acidification in the coral reefs pretty globally. But again, as you can imagine, given the coral reef density is so high in the warm waters in South and Southeast Asia, you can only imagine that some of these changes could be very accelerated in this part of the world compared to elsewhere. And if you can see the images in the panel down C, D, and E, you can see the amount of coral bleaching that these sites are facing. Gabby, go forward, please. Okay, so this is an amazing photo. This is actually by a group of 2 people who run this small diverse program in Bali Island, Indonesia. And you can see how amazingly fantastic this looks. And you can see that the reefs are all very good, very healthy. And this is actually a less visited site by the tourists. And I would rather say that it's kind of obvious that this region is still very, very pristine. Gabby, can you go forward? But look at this image here. This is Paul Pitt. This is actually very close to where Amit works, and he can give you a better idea of what he might be seeing on site. But look at the amount of degradation that has already taken place. And some of it is documented, some of it we know why it has happened, the others we don't know. We don't still know if there's hope of revival of these sites, or what is really happening to the fish population or the associated microbial populations. So these are still areas that are open for research questions, and I'm sure these are areas that could be giving us a lot of answers as we keep moving forward. Gabby, can you go forward, please? So this is where I stop. I'm going to pass it to Baby, who's going to now tell you why all of the photos that I showed you, how all of this actually stitches up into forming the Sarawak Hub.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anusha, for laying the foundation. As it is very clear that South Asia and also Southeast Asia are very badly affected, due to the changing climate. That also includes ocean acidification scenarios and situations. One of the most damning reports that have come out as part of the IPCC AR6 is which clearly shows that the regional seas and oceans of South Asia are very, very vulnerable. And if we look at the SDG 14, where we look at in SDG 14, the commitment in terms of the sustainable oceans, there is an indicator is there, SDG 14.3.1, where the pH data of the ocean is very, very important. And unfortunately, the South Asia is not very well represented. That means the data submission on ocean pH or the coastal ocean pH is not adequate, and we do not know what kind of changes might be happening. This is very important because more than 200 million people in South Asia are directly dependent on the coastal and marine bioresources on a daily basis, and it also drives the GDP of many of these countries in South Asia, including in South Asia Association for Regional Cooperation, the SAARC countries, which Anwesha talked about. These mostly include the 8 countries, including India and Bangladesh. So to have an effective implementable policy in a changing climate, understand the implications of the ocean acidification on marine bioresources and how that would affect the ecosystem services, there was an imperative need to develop a regional cooperative approach to measure pH of the oceans based on global standards that has been set by the GOON. And take that data forward and try to interpret in terms of livelihood, economics, and of course, on a much broader scale, the health and sustainability of the oceans in South Asia and beyond. So how did the South Asia regional network on ocean acidification, regional hub on ocean acidification came into existence? Well, there were two meetings that happened. In 2013, Richard Bellerby, Steve Widdicombe, Baden Russell, and Tyagarajan from came down, and they interacted with a lot of early career scientists and established scientists across South Asia. And then after a few years in 2020, there was another meeting that happened. Again, Richard Bellerby was there, Andrew Dixon, and a lot of other colleagues were there. There was another set of meeting that happened, and both of these meetings were hosted by the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Kolkata. In Kolkata, it happened, and that the 2020 meeting paved the way for the formation where an agreement came into existence among the South Asian communities, where the scientists, practitioners, citizens, that there is a need to look at the oceans more inclusively and from the viewpoint of ocean acidification. And that laid the foundation of the Sarwa Hub, where the hub office at the moment is. Well, it is located right now in Aizawl, Kolkata. It is housed there because the strategic location of Aizawl, Kolkata, it is very close to the Bay of Bengal, and it's also very well connected with all the South Asian countries. So that's one of the basis why this hub has come in Aizawl, Kolkata. And there are, of course, in South, all the South Asian countries are participating. So in this hub, so we have all the SAARC member countries, which is a very important pillar of South Asia. And beyond South Asia, as Anisha has pointed out, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines have shown interest to join this hub. This is in no way to duplicate the efforts of the Westpac, but actually to work together and to understand the implications of the health of oceans across Asia, rather I would say. And there are a sizable number of members are there. Can I go to the next slide, please? Thank you so much. And the idea of the Sarwa Hub is to basically promote the practice of collection of geographically distributed data on ocean acidification encompassing South Asian waters. And in South Asia, as I mentioned before also, that, to have an effective, sustainable and healthy ocean, the policies framing and integrating with the existing policies which can bring in interventional changes is very, very important. So Sarwa also intends to engage with the national governments, the regional governments, and the regional administrative pillars such as the SAARC, where there are environmental laws and framework in place, and also bring in GOAON and IAEA, IOC, UNESCO together, and all the other bodies to understand. And I think many of us already know, if you do not know, that there's a big program that GOAON is actually running, the WARS program, and that also brings in the importance of society, citizens, monitoring in understanding the health of the ocean. So Sarwa intends to work with all the organizations across South Asia for better management of coastal oceans and link blue economy. This is very important because across South Asia, the framework of blue economy has been done, but we all know the word blue economy is rather loosely bound. So there is no set framework, and therefore, in terms of framing the policy also, I think from the blue economy and linking what it means in a changing ocean or with pH, the implication needs to be very well understood. Next slide, please. So right now, the hub actually works in a very simplistic model. It has got a steering committee. The role of the steering committee is to give direction and manage the activities. And then you've got members representing different countries, where the members are expected to initiate national monitoring programs. You know that in South Asia, many of the countries do not have defined national monitoring programs. So therefore, there are some broad objectives which has been laid. For example, quantify the drivers of OA in regional seas and oceans of South Asia, understand the responses of biological communities in very important coastal biotopes, as Anisha has pointed out, contribute to the global data pool of OA coordinated by GOAN. I think this indicator of 14.3.1 is very important, and of course link it up to the livelihood and socioeconomic. So right now our steering committee members are represents almost all the countries. We have colleagues from Sri Lanka. Richard Bellarby is there from Malaysia, Warwar Min from Myanmar, Sahadev Sharma from Malaysia, VVSS Sharma from India, Subrata Sarkar from Bangladesh, and of course you've got Amit Kumar, Anisha, and Indulin Senanayake as the ECers of the regional hub. We expect this the steering committee to work very closely with the GOAN Secretariat and IAA division to expand and lay the foundation and the framework more robustly, so that we can have very good data coming out from the region and can interpret that in terms of the requirement of the region. Next slide, please. I think it's the same thing, which was mentioned, but I think there are two broad goals are there. Of course, one is the immediate goals that we have in place, and then there are long-term goals are there. I think in the immediate goals, one is which is spreading the awareness about ocean acidification in the participating countries and promote development of national hub for effective monitoring of OA. And I think these are the two immediate goals that we have to work with. And now I'll pass the baton to Amit to talk more about what the hub plans to do in the short and long term. Amit, please. Thank you.
Hello. So hello everyone. First of all, I would like to thank GOAN to recognize the Saroa Hub, which focuses on the ocean acidification related activities in the sea and the oceans of South Asia. As Professor Bhaduri and Dr. Anvesha have already not only discussed the importance of the South Asian marine environment and the diverse life it supports, but also talked about the vulnerability of this region in the light of climate change. So also Professor Bhaduri has said that ocean acidification, or pointed out that ocean acidification related research work is not very well studied in this particular area, resulting in the gap in information from this particular geographical location if we compare it with the other part of the world. So with the Saroa Hub, we would like to fulfill those gaps and connect the researchers working in the ocean acidification and the related fields in South Asia. And as you can see on the screen, we are already having the presence in the social media, in particular to Twitter and Facebook. So I urge all the participants to follow Twitter as well as the Facebook page, and also spread the news among your friends and colleagues working in this particular geographical region on ocean acidification related research to know about the news, about the updates and other announcements which will be bringing on time-to-time basis. Also, we are working on the website, separate website for the Saroa, which will be linked to GOAN main web page, the information for which we'll be sharing very much soon. Can we go to the next slide, please? Also, from the first week of July, we are intended to start a seminar or the webinar series where we are aiming to bring experienced or established researchers as well as the early career researchers to talk about their ongoing research work in this in the Southeast and the South Asia region related to the ocean acidification research. And also we are also planning to soon launch the form where the early career participants or early career researcher can contact us so that they can deliver the talk related to their research, what they are doing on ocean acidification in South Asia and Southeast Asia. So that also will be starting very much soon. And all these activities, we hope that can improve the representation of the South Asian researcher as the member of the GOAN as well. So right now, in the beginning of the talk, as the Secretariat members were saying that we are, increasing in the number of the participants who are interested in the Sarowa Hub. So we aim with all these activities to increase the representation of South Asian researcher in the Global Oceanographication Observing Network. So with this, I'd like to open the discussion. So if there is any suggestions or if there is anything to discuss with all of us, please do. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our speakers today for a wonderful presentation. I really appreciated learning about your area of the world, so thank you very much. And all of the attendees on the webinar, I encourage you to post your questions in the question box at this time so we can ask our speakers. And while we are waiting for your questions to come in, I will start us off with a question. So again, I really appreciated, Anwisha, all of the photos that you shared showing what a beautiful place of the world. I think you clearly made the case for why it's an important place to learn about and protect. I'm wondering if any of you can speak to some of the ocean acidification data efforts that are already occurring, and if you have any sense of the rate of ocean acidification or the extent of the issue locally based on current data that obviously will be greatly expanded by the Sarowa efforts.
So to start off, I think we just put a very quick word of caution here. The study of ocean acidification in the tropical regions become very, very complicated by the fact that you are very strongly also witnessing pH changes on a daily basis because of the variation in tides. You're also seeing a very prominent and significant variation in pH at a seasonal level. And if it's an open ocean, of course, you can understand that the dynamics are different. If it's a coastal region, this is far more dynamic. You're trying to track changes that are happening too rapidly. So what becomes very, very important for monitoring ocean acidification, and I'm sure if somebody is working directly on ocean acidification here, they'll be realizing that there is a need for constant monitoring. Or like how we want to put it, we say that go ahead and establish a time series. So we do have a time series in the Sundarbans, and we have seen that the annual variation that we observe in this region is something that we have to look very closely. We have to monitor very, very remotely in order to understand that with what is actually your fine scale changes that are happening due to the seasonal variation. And we'll have to then find a way to decouple this with the annual decadal variations. So until you have a long-term data, which we are just beginning to sum up for the area that I'm studying, it would be very, very difficult to say that what the variation in pH that you're witnessing is in fact what is the threat coming from ocean acidification, or this is just normal. And just to add here, this is where the complications of ocean acidification also come in, because imagine an organism that is living in this water. It's already seeing a seasonal pH change, which differs by several decimal points. And then, of course, you can understand how much of carbon dioxide it's actually taking out from the atmosphere in order for pH to change from 7.9 to 8 or 8.1. And if your organism is already facing that kind of changes on a daily basis, what is it that its response is going to be if I really put it under the margins that are set by IPCC to say that this is actually what oceanic pH is going to look like in the coming decade or the coming century, so on and so forth.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that answer. We have a question here from Steve Whitcomb. He says, as a co-chair of GoAON, I would like to personally thank you all for your leadership in setting up this hub. It is really important. It is a really important addition to the regional hub family. Are you able to say a little bit about SAROA's ambitions to build regional capacity and capabilities in OA monitoring?
Sure. Maybe I can answer that. Thank you, Steve. I think, we would not be having this hub off the ground, without your support and support from everybody from the GoAON Council. So I want to thank on behalf of everybody. Well, I think we, as I already said that, we have already started with a very ambitious plan. And I think, knowing the ground reality also, the capacity building is a big issue out here because we, as I was saying, we do not have national OA monitoring programs, number one. Number two, the OA measurements that are happening are largely discrete in nature and not getting, those information are not ending up in the 14.3.1 mandate, data sharing, mechanism. And the third thing is we do not know what is the the way the measurements are done. Is it done based on the protocols and approaches that have been standardized, as we see in the GoAON site and other available literature. So I think the way to tackle this is, we would like to organize very focused meetings, capacity building meetings that will have three objectives. One is chemical based measurements, biological based measurements, and the third one is the social implications, socials and economic implications of this data. And for the chemical and biological based measurements, this can be only achieved when you get all the support from the GoAON Executive Council, from IAEA, from IOC, UNESCO, because the kit, the GoAON has this very fantastic measuring kit, that can be very nicely deployed in resource limited countries. Many of the countries in South Asia are actually developing countries, so therefore resource is a limitation. So therefore we want to achieve this in a very systematic way after discussing and in a phase-wise manner. Having said that, the hub in ISAR Kolkata has managed to secure some funds to establish some instrumentation facilities so that the training can be even more advanced at advanced level, particularly at the biological scale if we look at it. So Anvesha was mentioning about that in South Asia there is only one time series site is there for mangroves. It is the Sundarbans Biological Observatory time series. And if you look at the paper that got published a few years back led by Helen Finlay and Peter Land, you could see that the carbonate chemistry data from the Bay of Bengal versus the other regions, there's a big wide disparities there. That is because the data points are not many. And there is, of course, a big freshwater flux is a big factor out there throughout the South Asian coastline. So we have developed the hub is actually got support from ISAR Kolkata in terms of instrumentation, advanced monitoring, and also trying to secure has already secured some funds for capacity building of scientists, ECRs and beyond from the across South Asia. But I think all these will be more meaningful when we actually kind of coordinate very effectively with the huge experience that GoAON Council brings in, IOC, UNESCO, and of course IAEA. So I think it's a long, but we know there's a positive journey ahead, and we seek your support throughout this phase.
Yes, of course. and we look forward to working with you on these things. So I had a few more questions come in that are actually related. And PB, you did just touch on some of this, but I will ask the questions to see if there's anything else any of you want to add on this topic. We have a question from Libby Jewett. She says, so exciting to see the launch of SAROA. Have you been conducting any biological response studies in the region? If so, which species are you studying? And I will ask the second related question from Katerina Shu at the same time, who says, are you planning on combining ocean acidification and biological monitoring?
Yeah, I think I give my comments. Maybe I'll ask Anwesh and Amit to first say, and then I can tell if that is okay.
Yes, so I'll answer the first question about the ocean acidification related work which is ongoing. So there are several research groups in India who are focusing on the response of several plants, marine plants and the animals to ocean acidification. For example, there are few research groups in South Tamil Nadu in India who are working on the sea urchins and other calcareous organisms. In our lab, and some of the colleagues with me are studying seaweeds like red algae, Gracilaria, and green seaweeds like ulva, and their response. But most of these studies, what we are doing is in the laboratory condition, in a controlled setup. So we have not yet, or as far as I know, there are not many studies which are ongoing in situ in the field to understand how the ocean acidification impacts those organisms. So yeah, that's it from my side. Anvesha and Punshloka.
So to add on Amit's point, there are actually some things that I do want to point out. So when we do talk about OA research here, I think we need to decouple whether we are really looking at variations in terms of changing the pCO2 of the water, or are we looking at experimentation in terms of changing just the pH? And so I think the kind of research that you're talking about varies according to the question that the researchers are asking. Of course, if I'm not very wrong, there's actually a lot of research on OA that is going on. But then again, the primary reason why there was this urgent need to set up this hub was so that we could connect and start talking to each other about the kind of data that we are getting out of the ocean acidification questions that we are asking in South and Southeast Asia. So also given that the dynamicity of the ecosystems is very wide in this entire regional setup that we did show you, it is highly probable that the kind of changes that Amit is seeing down when he's working in South India versus what I am looking in East Asia or in Eastern India in Sundarbans would be very, very different. So it is now becoming important that we start to talk to everybody who's working on this kind of research to see that whether they're getting the similar kind of trends that we are getting. Also, more specifically to the biological questions, we are trying to couple the variations pH with microorganisms, including bacterioplankton, what I work with on phytoplankton, on zooplankton, on different types of fish, on coral reefs, and many other things that people are looking at. But again, when we go to the biology, a lot of this is complicated by the fact that when you're looking at tropical coastal oceans, you are unable to vary, or you're unable to pinpoint that any of the changes or the trends that you're seeing is happening only because of ocean acidification, because a lot of that is complicated by bigger factors such as salinity, or there's a huge amount of fresh water that flows in through this region. So I think more and more the research on the biological groups are now becoming important to study the kind of responses. But on the final note, myself looking at what happens to phytoplankton in response to ocean acidification, and I'm trying to achieve that by looking at both a direct variation in pH and also by altering the PCO2 of the water. So as we start getting results, we'll be very happy to share with everyone, and then we can take it forward from there.
PB, are you going to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add because coastal fisheries is a big thing, it's strongly linked to the socioeconomics across South Asia. And there's a big program that we are running where we're looking at how in coastal oceans the diatoms are responding to changing pH. Anish has already pointed that one out. And it's as part of that we're looking at using genomic approaches also, field genomic approaches in environmental transcriptomics to understand these responses. So one is like Nash has already pointed out, changing pH changes and then PCO2 conditions, and also using field mesocosm setups. I think over the years talking with all the big leaders in the field, I've understood one thing very clearly, that we're looking at a multiple stressor scenario, and mimicking these multiple stressors is rather impossible under laboratory conditions, and we're looking at one stressor and trying to understand which is a pH in terms of the productivity and what it means for the fisheries. So what we also envisage to do, some discussion is going on that the experiments that we are doing as part of simple field mesocosm setups, can we redo this in other parts of South Asia, for example, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh? Some discussion is going on at the moment, so that we can understand at a regional scale what the responses would be. So yes, we have started a bit late, but I think we are gradually starting to catch up and getting connected with the global community, where so much work has happened more than 10 years now.
Yes, thank you. You all just articulated, I think, some of the big challenges with studying something as complicated as OA in terms of the coastal variability and the multiple stressors that all impact biological response. And I'm actually wondering if you could now speak to some of the challenges, or what you might see as the biggest challenges to the data collection side, and to getting to the point where you've established an observation network to help start detangling some of the questions you just spoke about.
Yeah, I think you have raised a very important question. I think there are on-ground challenges, and the on-ground challenges are not that the data cannot be shared, but I think the reality is there are geopolitical challenges that somewhere or other binds to the ocean policies in South Asia and beyond. And one example, of course, we can talk about is the Quad. Is an example of how Indian Ocean has become very important. Now, having said that, there are institutional frameworks there. I was telling about the South Asia Association for Regional Cooperation. This is SARC, and there are 8 member countries are there from South Asia. It started in the 80s. There are frameworks are there for environmental laws, and that allows us to use and start the dialogue so that we can contribute to the SDG 14 goals. That's first thing. Second thing is there may be countries in South Asia where systematic data collection is going on, but the data is not being shared. We are also engaging with the stakeholders and how to bring down that barrier so that these data sets can be opened up. For example, I can talk about in the time series site that we started more than 12 years ago. Most of these data are already kind of opened up. There are as I was saying, the work of Helen Finlay's one of the papers, and then much earlier than that Though some of those data we have opened up and shared, but I think we are now going at a stage where we're going to submit those data in a systematic manner. And I think setting an example that how important data sharing is for member countries. And I think the hub is going to play an important role. We know that it requires a lot of cross-talking and engagement with the national governments and regional pillars. And for example, ASEAN, India, cooperation is required, is one example where it will be very, very important. Myanmar is one country, one of the countries where you're very interested, which does not have any national level program, but they're very keen to get started. So how do we get those process and programs started in a dynamic environment they are facing in? And how then that data becomes available? I think, we are starting some early stages of discussion, but I think this discussion needs to be more sustained. And I feel that but I particularly feel that the high CO2 symposium, which is coming up very soon before the end of this year, is going to be very important, because we'll have a lot of multiple stakeholders on board, where this cross-talking can become more important. And of course, much earlier than that, in the end of June and the beginning of July, the UN Ocean Conference is there, which also paves way another platform to actually discuss with the governments in South Asia and open up the data connectivity issue or the data sharing issue. So our engagement process is slow at the moment, but it is a steady engagement. And we hope to get support from all of you, so that we can have we can bring all the national governments on board in terms of the data sharing. Although we know that there are short and long-term challenges ahead, but we hope to overcome these challenges. And I think this is going to be one of the main pillars of the hub of Sarowa Hub, which is going to trying to achieve in the long run over the years to come.
That's great, PB. While we are on the topic of the challenges of collecting data and building the capacity, could you touch a little bit on any specific regions within the Sarowa Hub that you think are particularly undersampled and will need more support or data observations in the future?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think if we look at the regional seas and oceans, and you'll see that the northern part of the Indian Ocean, northeastern part of the Indian Ocean, I think there is a lot of data scarcities there. There's slightly more data or more systematic data, I would say, in the Arabian Sea part of the Indian Ocean. But I think if you look at the Bay of Bengal or parts of the Andaman Sea, I think there are data deficiencies are there. And if I go down from the northern part towards the tropical Indian Ocean, the eastern part of the tropical Indian Ocean also, I think there are some data scarcities are there. I think according to what we understand is there are two aspects of it. One is the data from a biotope viewpoint, which I think Anisha and Amit already pointed out, that there are some very vulnerable biotopes are there. For those biotopes, monitoring is very important in terms of pH and biological effects. And the second is more on a broader scale, on a regional oceanic scale, where there is data scarcity is there. So, we already have in the Bay of Bengal, we have got 2 data buoys, right? The pH data is getting collected, but I think that number is not enough, not adequate. And I know discussion is going on, for example, between WMO and a lot of the other programs, to increase the number of the buoys and do the collection. But I think it has to go beyond collection. It has to, after collection, what happens with the data? I think that is also very important. So overall, if you tell me northeastern part of the Indian Ocean, many of the biotopes that represents the northeastern part of the Indian Ocean, and also down south where also it comes from, there are huge data scarcity or data gaps are there. We need to address those data, and actually, incidentally, those are also areas where majority of the South Asian countries or the residents of the South Asian countries who are dependent on the coastal resources, on a daily basis. So I think we need to bridge those gaps as soon as possible, and with a very effective program and implementation in place.
That sounds great. Thank you for that comprehensive overview. We had a follow-up question come in regarding the previous question about biological response. What are some key species that you think should be studied or are already being studied?
I request Anusha and Amit to answer this, maybe. No.
So overall, the whole habitat needs to be studied. For example, mangrove or coral reef. So if we need to study the entire habitat, that should be the aim. And in particular to any species, it's difficult to pinpoint any particular species which needs to be studied. I would say that we need to study the entire habitat. For example, mangrove or coral reef or seagrass or seaweed beds like that. Anvisha?
I think this is a very, very tough question to answer, but as a personal suggestion, I think go ahead and study whatever you want to study. For example, so when I started studying, I was very interested in bacterioplankton, and that's the only thing that I wanted to study, to be honest. And then when I started looking at it more deeply, I saw that no matter what you do, they recover. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's going to be happening 10 years from now. Maybe it's going to be too much for them to keep withstanding the changes, the pressures that we are building on the ecosystems. And maybe at some point they'll stop being resilient and they'll stop responding and they'll just cease to exist. Most likely it will not be happening for the bacteria, but what I fear is that what we may not be able to track with these small organisms could be reflected in much larger quantities, for example, in terms of the total productivity of the region, right? So I think a lot of people in terms of the biological communities do look at bacteria, bacterial response, bacterioplankton. People also widely look at what is going to happen to cyanobacteria and to phytoplankton overall. But with specific groups, I know there's a lot of people who are studying lab-based cultures where they look at what is going to be happening to a particular enzyme, maybe if you subject it to too much change, and what is the point that is actually going to flip out, So yeah, so if you do want to know more about information that we have in terms of biological responses, biological groups that we are studying, what the others are studying, maybe our colleagues that whom we know about, please do shoot us an email and we can speak about it more then.
Maybe I can add one more point out to here. So for example, here in South Asia, there's one fish species is there, which is economically very important. It's called gray head mullet or flat head mullet, and gray mullet also goes by the name of gray mullet. Now this mullet contributes a significant amount of the GDP across South Asia. It's not just India we're talking about, There's India, Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, also Maldives. So these mullets feed on zooplankton and phytoplankton and also on benthic algae. So you can clearly see, if we want to understand the way responses, we need to look at all these components very clearly, because this is strongly shaping the livelihood aspect. That's one thing. I also want to bring in the other issue is, I did not talk about is we currently don't have a baseline data. I think generating the baseline data in itself is a big challenge that we face. And then we're talking about countries, such as Maldives, which is very rich in biodiversity, very unique type of biodiversity, geological features. They may be undergoing much more changes. Unexplored biodiversity is of course also there. So I think all these needs, these aspects needs to fit in very well when you're talking about the species. But obviously, when you talk about South Asia, economy is a very important aspect. So of course, economic species will get more significance, and how do we link that up is very, very important. So I think the focus in some way or other has to integrate economics with the policy and the way, and we must not forget one other thing, that the role of the citizens here across South Asia. We have a huge population, and I think the citizens are very, very informed. Of course, the hub will play a much important role in providing specific information. And I think we need to do citizen-driven monitoring programs. I think it has been done very nicely for a lot of other aspects in coastal and marine ecosystem. But I think for OA, it has not been tried out very effectively. And I think there's huge scope where I see that can be done in South Asia, given the kind of challenges we have in terms of data. Of course, ensuring that a data reproducibility is maintained. That is, of course, which is very, very important.
I really like that point. I think the idea of citizen science, especially around a topic that can be so engaging like ocean acidification, can be a really great approach. And we'll have to talk about that further. So we have one more question here. Wondering about oceanographic data that is currently available in India and where that might be archived and how it could be accessed. If you have any ideas on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer this question. This is the most challenging question. I think in India, all the oceanographic research is mostly funded by a ministry called the Ministry of Earth Sciences. And then also there's another funding agency or ministries, they're called Ministry of Science and Technology. I am aware that both of these ministries have their own databases where these data are kind of archived. We know that these data are not being made available for wider purposes. But I would like to mention today that we very recently, even yesterday also, I was there incidentally in Delhi, where I was talking with one of the senior persons out there, trying to see that how this archive data can be opened up, number one, because I think these data would be very, very important. And it need not be a data on pH, there could be much more data, for example, salinity or temperature, productivity, which could be very, very important. That is one thing that we are working with. The other thing is there are many institutes in India there which falls under the aegis of the Ministry of Earth Sciences and Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. I think Richard Bellarmine knows a little bit because he's engaged with CSIR in the past. We hope to engage more effectively, and I'm very pleased that Sharma, VVSS Sharma, he's a very experienced oceanographer who has worked on ocean acidification and has been working on ocean acidification based in National Institute of Oceanography, one of the principal organizations under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, under the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. He is also one of our ECR, he's also one of our steering committee members. And we are hoping to engage through Sharma and try to understand how and in what way these data sets can be opened up for a bigger purpose to understand the state of health of oceans. I think this engagement is already going on at one-to-one level, but I think the hub hopes to engage more effectively with the ministries and try to understand that how these data sets can be opened up, or how the archive data can be more effectively used along the way.
Awesome. I think that is a really great note to end on as we come to the end of this webinar. So I would like to thank our speakers one last time for such a great presentation, Amit, PB, and Anwesha, and a really good conversation at the end here. And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for joining us for this edition of the Goa On webinar series. If you would like to stay up to date with the Goa On community, consider signing up as a Goa On member at www.goa-on.org, where you also can sign up to be a member of the Saroa Hub. We will be announcing the next webinar on Twitter and on our Goa On email listserv, so please keep an eye out for that announcement. Thank you, everyone, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.